All right. Speaking with a legendary rocker who is currently in Finland, I'm glad to welcome him back to the Church of Rock. Welcome, Dave TREGUNNA, to the Church of Rock. What's up, Dave?
Hi, Derek. Yep. How you doing, man?
I'm good, man. And it's great to hear that you have finally beat the bloody COVID.
Yeah. It lingered on for a while. I had probably 3 days in bed with flu-like symptoms, but then the weird thing was that it just carried on. You know, I was tired and I had a cough for a couple of weeks, and I'm only just feeling back to normal, really.
Wow. Well, congratulations. I'm glad that you're feeling better, man, instead of worse.
Yeah.
So, you're based in the UK normally, but you're in Finland right now. So I hear you're playing gigs with Michael Monroe.
Well, I'm actually based in Finland now. I bought a house in Finland.
Trippy.
And myself and my dear wife, we live in Finland. And I still kept a place on in London. So when I go back to do SHAM gigs, I have a place to go. And also my stepdaughter's living there. So I'm kind of, mainly in Finland when I'm not gigging.
Wow, I did not know that. I don't know. I'm a huge fan of everything you've done, and I'm a huge fan of everything Michael Monroe's done, and I was told that you're playing with Michael. Well,
we had planned, if it wasn't for COVID, to do this gig. It's only a one-off thing. It's for Vive Le Rock magazine, which is a London-based magazine for rock. And as part of the annual event, I guess, for Vive Le Rock, they put on this show, and the main guy, Eugene from Vive Le Rock, wanted to know if Brian James and myself would just do as a one-off special gig, do some Lord's numbers.
Wow.
And had it not been for the COVID epidemic, we would have done them 2 years ago now, but they kept being put off. So finally now it's been rearranged for next March to 2023. And as obviously probably everyone knows, there's no chance that we could get Steve to come back from the other side to be the singer. So Eugene, who was working with Mike Monroe, said, how about Mike Monroe? And as you know, Mike was a Lord's fan and good friends with Steve. He's going to be the singer, and the drummer will be Terry Chimes.
Wow! So we've got a member.
Actually, the reason that it's kind of cool with Terry as a drummer. I mean, I've played with him in other bands before, Cherry Bombs and The Crunch, but he was originally in the band that became Lords of the New Church. He did a few rehearsals with Steve and Brian, and then and Tony James on bass. But they didn't get on with Brian. Didn't musically see the same direction, with Tony James. So I stepped in as bass player and did a couple of rehearsals with Terry, and then, for various reasons, we got Nicky Turner in. Terry was just kind of helping out, but he was there in the very beginning, before the band even had a name or had done any gigs. So it's kind of perfect for Terry to do the drums. So, wow. But it's just a one-off thing. It wouldn't be a permanent thing. Well, you never know. There may be other gigs come of it, but Mike Monroe obviously has his own thing going, and Brian has his own thing going, and I have my own thing with SHAM. So, it's not likely to be any more than a one-off.
But that's one hell of a super group, man. Members of SHAM 69, The Damned, Lords of the New Church, The Clash, and Hanoi Rocks. Come on, wow.
Yeah. I guess people will see it like that. To me, they're just mates.
Absolutely, I understand. You're jaded now, bro, but God.
That's it.
being like a fanboy like I am, I'm like, wow, I got stars in my eyes. I wish I could go to that show. Wow.
Yeah. Well, come over to England. It's at the Shepherd's Bush Empire in London. And it's
you say March 2023.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, April 2023.
You know what? I'll take you up on that. I will come to that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have to speak further about that. Yeah.
Absolutely, Dave. Thanks for the information. I'd like to know, what else do you do when you're not doing music, or is everything you do related to music?
At the moment, I guess, I just do SHAM, really. So that's musically all I do. What else do I do? Now that we have this house in Finland, it's in the countryside, so I'm taking up farming. No, seriously, there's a lot of work to do around the gardens, and we're growing our own vegetables and stuff like that. So, there's a lot of work still to do here. But yeah, I'm not doing anything other than music or looking after the home.
Well, you know what? We do gardening as well.
My wife to look after the home, because she's got all the experience and the know-how about cultivating vegetables and everything. So I just help out, mow the lawns and stuff like that.
See, we have a lot in common there, because my wife has gardens as well, but I'm just a rocker. But I love gardening and stuff, so I just help out too, man.
Yeah. It's actually quite, I enjoy it. The only thing at the moment is we have a plague of mosquitoes, and when you're out there working on the ground, it's trying to keep off the mosquitoes. The bastards biting you everywhere.
Well, you've got that sweet blood, perhaps.
Yeah. But yeah, so I'm really enjoying it. As I say, I'd lived in London for over 50 years and lived in LA. Always been a city boy, really, apart from when I was very young, because I was basically brought up when I was up till I was about 8 in the countryside. So I've got that, early love for the countryside and the woods and the wildlife. But now we're here in a quite remote place, a beautiful location in Finland.
Have you ever worked any other jobs in your life outside of music?
Yeah, I have actually. Yeah, I for a little while I was teaching web design. This is back in the, I suppose, in the 90s and 2000s. And also I worked as what would you call it? Really, it was called a manager, but it was managing a group of people who had disabilities, managing their journeys on a program to try and get them work.
Well, interesting.
Yeah, it was interesting. Yeah. But now I'm retired from that kind of work, so just music and gardening.
That's wonderful. What a great life, man.
Yeah, I'm happy.
Good to hear, Dave.
Yeah.
Couple questions from a fan of yours that was listening to your last interview online, and he sent over some questions for this interview. Sean Mesa from Medford, Oregon. Sean Mesa wants to know about your experience working on the movie Tapeheads.
Well, he's not going to get much out of that, because I didn't work on that. The Lords did that when I left the Lords and joined the Cherry Bombs.
Okay.
In 1986. And just after I left, they did the Tapeheads movie.
Okay, that he must not have known that. Okay, now he does.
Didn't, no. And the bass player then would be Grant Fleming.
Okay.
And that last lineup of the Lords before we reformed briefly again, the Lords, in 1988. But Grant was the bass player then, and I'd known Grant because he was, for a little while, in the very early days of Sham 69, he tour managed Sham 69.
Interesting.
So we were buddies as well. So. But I left the Lords, I guess, right at the very end of 1985 to join the Cherry Bombs.
Well, speaking of the Lords, Sean Mesa also sent over one other question, and it concerns the infamous Lords Stiv Bader's T-shirt incident.
Aha.
I'm wondering what the rest of the band thought about that whole thing happening, or was it blown out of proportion, or was it as awkward as it seems like it might have been?
In some ways, it was awkward, yeah, and it was not particularly what you'd want to happen, but basically, what happened? Stiv was living in Paris, and we had some gigs planned, a European tour, and Brian had spoken to Stiv, and Stiv had told Brian that he was unable to do most of these gigs. He didn't want to do them. He had a really bad back. He wasn't feeling good. And this is what Brian told me. Brian said, well, we've got to do these gigs because, it's income, and we didn't have management or a record label at that time. And so apparently Stiv said to Brian, well, if you want to get another singer in to fill in for me, because I'm not going to do these, I will still do the Astoria in London, which was planned at the end of this tour. It's about a 2-week tour of France, Germany, Spain, Italy. But Stiv had told Brian, why don't you get another singer? Now, whether he was serious with Brian about that or not, but Brian informed me of this. I've spoken to Stiv, and he said, so I've put an advert in the New Musical Express and Melody Maker to get a singer to come and audition so we can still do these gigs. So we did have several people show up, but none of them were anywhere near good enough to fill Stiv's boots. So in the end, we had to cancel that tour, and I think Brian had heard from a friend of his who was also in Paris that Stiv had been out on the town, like night clubbing and partying, and there didn't seem to be anything wrong with Stiv's back. So this put, Brian felt wounded that Stiv was telling him tales and stuff like that. And so, we hadn't seen Stiv at all for a few weeks. Apparently, Stiv had seen this advert, or someone had informed him, that someone's put an advert in, and it looks like it's to replace you. So Stiv obviously got pissed off about that, but he didn't call me or mention anything to anyone. He just turned up in London to do the gig at the Astoria, and he turned up late. We didn't really have a chance to speak to him much at all, just backstage, but he didn't seem to be pissed off or anything. But obviously, knowing Stiv, he'd planned this little prank or to get his own back, and he'd had a T-shirt made up which had was just printed with the text of the advert that Brian had advertised for a replacement singer. and he didn't wear it during the main part of the gig, but when he came on for the encore, he'd put this T-shirt on. So I'm there starting to play the first number of the encore, and Stiv suddenly comes in front of me, facing me, and like jumping around, pointing at the T-shirt. Now, my head was in the music, so I just thought Stiv was, being a happy Stiv and saying, "Yeah, great, look." I didn't even read the T-shirt. I didn't take it in at all till later. I understood what it said, but I just smiled at Stiv. And so he obviously thought, well, Dave's not reacting to this. I guess he did the same to the rest of the band. So that was basically, the T-shirt. He'd printed it off with the text from the advert, and he was flaunting it in front of me in the encore. And, I was completely... My head was in the music. I didn't read the T-shirt, so I didn't even realise it was a sign of Stiv being really upset. And straight after the gig, Steve's wife, or I don't know if they were married actually then, but his French missus, Caroline, had booked a taxi, and they basically disappeared straight after the gig. So I didn't even have a chance to talk to him about it. And that was the last gig we did as the Lords, with Steve singing.
What a trip. That's such a legendary story. Well, thanks for telling us about that. That was pretty interesting, man.
And I think, Brian really now is quite regretful that barrier had put between Steve and Brian, and Brian never had a chance really, because shortly after that gig, Steve passed away in Paris, and Brian hadn't had a chance to make it up with him, because they'd been old buddies. They would have probably made it up and, got over it. But Steve went and died. But I had met up with Steve. He did come back to London after that, called me up, and we met. We went to a Mexican restaurant together, and, I explained from my point of view why Brian had put that advert in, and we made it up, which I was really glad, because after Steve went back again to Paris, he died shortly after that, and at least I had a chance to make it up with him after that event at the London Astoria with the T-shirt.
Yeah, that's really good, man, because it was very shocking when he died so damn young in such a crazy way. Yeah,
really.
Speaking of Steve, one last question from me about him. Any stories at all, or any memories about when you recorded with Steve Baders, Michael Monroe, and Patty Paladin doing backing vocals for Empty Party for Johnny Thunders?
Endless Party.
Yeah, Endless Party, sorry.
Yeah. No, we just all went over there to hang out with Johnny, and he had that track Endless Party, so we all got round a mic together and did the backing vocals. But that was just, another time. We were all friends at the time, all part of the same crowd, and
interesting.
It's just a one-off thing in the studio, but it's good fun.
How about this one? What's the secret? What would you imagine is the secret for staying young? And some people, they get older and they kind of fall apart, but it seems like a lot of rockers seem like they get a pass and they kind of keep going. People like Charlie Harper, people like a lot of the rockers that are in their 60s, 70s, 80s now. What's the secret, Dave, to staying young and staying rocking?
I guess, lots of people have their own ways of doing it. I mean, one common way of my people of my age that have been in the business for so long is basically you tone down your intake of alcohol and drugs and the wildlife,
It makes sense.
At a certain point, if you carry on doing that, that will shorten your life. And those of us who have moderated those youthful lusts for getting wrecked and having fun, we're still around.
Yeah, well, amen to that, bro. I'm glad that you...
And I think music keeps you young.
Yeah.
An active mind, keeping up with the times, doing things, keeping your brain going, whatever turns you on to do that. But definitely the main reason that those of us who were wild and crazy in the younger days is we learned to do it in moderation, I guess.
Well said, man. Words of wisdom. Really appreciate talking to you, like always, man. And I'm always interested in everything you're doing musically. Good luck over in Finland with the new house, and I look forward to seeing you in April of 2023 over in England when you do that super awesome kick-ass all-star gig, man.
Well, you got my contact. Keep in touch, and nearer the time, if you still want to come over, we can sort you out there.
Dave, I appreciate it very, very much. Have a great rest of your evening, my friend, and again, good luck with the new home in Finland.
I'm enjoying it a lot, and nice to speak to you again, Derek. And We'll speak again soon, I hope.
Yeah, absolutely. Cheers and have a great night.
Cheers, mate. Good night.
Good night.